Most people think Machiavelli taught us to lie our way to power, but they've got it completely backwards. The real secret that made him the most feared advisor in Renaissance Italy wasn't deception at all. It was something far more dangerous and infinitely more powerful: calibrated honesty. While everyone else was playing checkers with their words, carefully crafting lies and half-truths, Machiavelli discovered that the smartest players were actually playing chess with the truth itself. They understood that in a world full of liars, the person who knows exactly when and how to tell the truth becomes untouchable. Here's what nobody tells you about power. It's not built on fear or manipulation like everyone thinks. Real power, the kind that lasts, the kind that makes people follow you into battle, comes from something much simpler, yet infinitely harder to master: strategic authenticity. Think about the most powerful people you know personally, not the ones you see on social media pretending their lives are perfect, but the ones who actually get things done, who people genuinely respect and listen to. I guarantee you they all share one trait. They've mastered the art of being selectively transparent at exactly the right moments. This isn't about being brutally honest all the time. That's just social suicide with extra steps. And it's definitely not about lying your way to the top, because that house of cards always falls eventually. This is about understanding that your honesty is actually your most valuable currency. And like any currency, its power comes from how strategically you spend it. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how to turn your truth into your greatest strategic advantage, how to build unshakable credibility that opens doors others can't even see, and why the people who understand this principle will always outmaneuver those who don't. Number 1. The credibility bank account strategy. There's a billionaire who built his empire on something most people throw away every single day without even realizing it. He understood that while everyone else was chasing money, connections, and influence, there was actually a different kind of currency hiding in plain sight. A currency so powerful that once you learn to accumulate it, people will literally fight to give you opportunities. This currency isn't Bitcoin, it isn't gold, it isn't even traditional money. Yet it's more valuable than all of them combined because it's the one thing that makes everything else possible. And here's the kicker. Most people are not just poor in this currency, they're actually deep in debt without knowing it. Think about the last time someone promised you something and didn't deliver. Maybe they said they'd call you back and never did. Or they promised to help with a project and vanished. Every time that happens, something invisible but incredibly valuable gets destroyed. Your brain automatically files that person under unreliable, and once that filing happens, it's almost impossible to undo. Now flip the script. Think about someone in your life whose word means everything. When they say something, you believe it instantly. When they make a promise, you don't even worry about whether they'll follow through. These people seem to have some kind of magic power over others. They get better jobs, stronger relationships, and more opportunities. But it's not magic at all. What they've mastered is something I call the credibility bank account strategy, and it's the first of 5 game-changing principles that will transform how people see you and respond to you. This isn't about being a good person for the sake of being good. This is about understanding that your credibility works exactly like a financial account, and most people are operating with massive overdrafts. Every single interaction you have with another human being either makes a deposit or a withdrawal from your credibility account. When you show up exactly when you said you would, that's a deposit. When you deliver precisely what you promised, that's a deposit. When you tell the truth even when it's inconvenient, that's a deposit. But when you exaggerate, when you're late, when you make excuses, when you promise things you can't deliver, you're making withdrawals. Here's where it gets interesting. The vast majority of people operate with overdrawn credibility accounts. They've made so many small withdrawals through broken promises, white lies, and unreliable behavior that their credibility balance is actually negative. This means that even small, consistent deposits from you make you incredibly wealthy in comparison. The strategy is deceptively simple, but requires discipline most people don't have. Start treating every truthful interaction as an investment in your future power. Begin making small, consistent deposits by being absolutely reliable in minor things. If you say you'll send an email by 3 p.m., send it by 2:55. If you promise to research something, over-deliver with more information than expected. Build your credibility balance high enough, and something remarkable happens. People start believing you even when you make mistakes. They give you the benefit of the doubt in situations where others would be questioned. Your recommendations carry weight. Your opinions matter. You become someone whose word has actual market value. The beautiful irony is that in a world where most people's promises have become worthless, your commitment to truthfulness becomes a competitive advantage that's almost impossible to match. Number 2. The selective vulnerability technique. The most powerful woman in corporate America just shared something with me that completely changed how I think about building trust. She told me about a boardroom presentation that saved her career, but not for the reasons you might think. She didn't win them over with brilliant insights or flawless execution. She won them over by admitting something that most executives would never dare to say. What she revealed created an instant connection that normally takes years to develop. It transformed a room full of skeptical executives into allies in under 60 seconds. And the crazy part is what she shared was technically a weakness, yet it made her appear stronger than anyone else in that room. This brings us to one of the most counterintuitive secrets of building influence through honesty. Most people think vulnerability makes you weak, but they're missing the bigger picture. When used strategically, vulnerability becomes one of the most powerful tools for gaining trust and influence you'll ever encounter. But here's the crucial part that everyone gets wrong. This isn't about trauma dumping or oversharing personal information. That actually destroys trust and makes people uncomfortable. This is about mastering what I call the selective vulnerability technique. And it's the second principle that will revolutionize how people connect with you. The technique works because of a fascinating quirk in human psychology. When someone reveals a carefully chosen personal struggle or uncertainty, our brains automatically classify them as more trustworthy. We unconsciously think to ourselves, if they're willing to show me this weakness, they must be showing me their real self. This creates what psychologists call an intimacy shortcut. But the magic isn't in the vulnerability itself. It's in the strategic timing and selection of what you reveal. The key is sharing a genuine weakness in a context where it actually demonstrates strength. For example, admitting you don't know something in a situation where your honesty prevents a bigger problem. Or acknowledging a past failure that shows you've learned and grown. Here's how you implement this. First, identify genuine areas where you've struggled, failed, or felt uncertain. These need to be real because people can sense fake vulnerability immediately. Second, practice framing these experiences in ways that show growth, learning, or strength. Third, wait for the right moments when sharing these experiences serves a larger purpose. The corporate executive I mentioned earlier admitted to the board that she had made a major strategic mistake at her previous company, but then explained exactly what she learned from it and how that knowledge would prevent similar problems at their company. Her vulnerability became proof of her wisdom and trustworthiness. When you master this technique, people begin to feel like they know the real you, even though you're only sharing strategically chosen pieces of your story. They develop a false sense of intimacy that makes them more likely to trust your judgment, follow your recommendations, and give you opportunities. The most successful leaders understand that perfect people are impossible to trust because perfection feels fake. People who show calculated vulnerability feel authentic, and authenticity is the foundation of all lasting influence. Remember, this isn't about manipulation. It's about understanding that trust is built through genuine human connection, and sometimes that connection requires the courage to show your humanity at exactly the right moment. Number 3. The inconvenient truth leverage. There's a moment in every meeting, every conversation, every relationship where everyone in the room is thinking the same thing, but nobody wants to say it out loud. The elephant sits there, growing bigger and more obvious by the minute, while everyone pretends it doesn't exist. Most people stay silent because they're afraid of conflict, afraid of being disliked, or afraid of the consequences. But there's always one person who isn't afraid. One person who has the courage to say what everyone else is thinking. And when they speak up, something powerful happens. The entire room shifts. People lean in. The fake politeness disappears and real conversation begins. That person instantly becomes the most respected voice in the room, even if what they said made people uncomfortable. This is what I call the inconvenient truth leverage, and it's the third principle that separates those who follow from those who lead. Most people think being liked is the path to influence, but they've got it backwards. Real influence comes from being respected, and respect comes from having the courage to say what needs to be said when it needs to be said. Here's what most people don't understand about truth-telling. It's not about being brutally honest all the time or saying whatever pops into your head. That's just social suicide with extra steps. Strategic truth-telling is about recognizing those crucial moments when speaking up serves both the situation and your long-term interests. The technique works because of a simple psychological principle. In a world full of people who say what they think others want to hear, the person who says what everyone is actually thinking stands out like a lighthouse in fog. They appear authentic, while others appear calculating. They seem courageous, while others seem afraid. They become memorable, while others blend into the background. But timing is everything. The key is identifying those moments when the truth you want to tell aligns with what the situation actually needs. When your honesty solves a problem that everyone else is too polite to address. When your directness cuts through confusion, that diplomatic language only makes worse. Let me give you an example. In a project meeting where everyone is pretending a deadline is realistic when it clearly isn't, most people stay quiet to avoid conflict. But the person who says, "We all know this timeline is impossible with current resources, so let's talk about what's actually achievable," immediately becomes the most valuable person in that room. They've given everyone permission to be honest about the real situation. Here's how you implement this strategy. First, start paying attention to those moments when you sense collective discomfort or shared unspoken thoughts. Second, practice framing inconvenient truths in ways that focus on solutions rather than just problems. Third, choose your moments strategically, focusing on situations where your honesty serves the greater good, not just your desire to be right. The most influential people understand that sometimes being helpful means being uncomfortable. They know that short-term discomfort from hearing the truth is always better than long-term disaster from avoiding it. When you become known as someone who will address the difficult topics that others avoid, people start coming to you for advice, including you in important decisions and trusting you with bigger responsibility. This isn't about being confrontational or difficult. It's about being courageously helpful. It's about understanding that real leadership sometimes requires saying the things that need to be said, even when they're hard to hear. Number 4. The predictable honesty framework. I once knew a guy who could borrow money from strangers, not because he was charming or persuasive, but because of something much more powerful. His reputation preceded him everywhere he went. People who had never met him would lend him money based solely on what others had told them about his character. What he had built was something more valuable than wealth, more influential than connections, and more powerful than charisma. He had created what I call predictable honesty, and it made him practically unstoppable in business and relationships. People trusted him with their secrets, their money, and their futures because they had absolute confidence in one thing. His word was his bond, and his bond had never been broken. This brings us to the fourth principle that will transform how people see you and respond to you. Most people focus on trying to appear trustworthy in big moments, in important conversations, in situations where the stakes are high. But they're missing where trust actually gets built. Trust gets built in the small moments, the everyday interactions, the tiny promises that seem insignificant. The predictable honesty framework is based on a simple but profound insight. People judge your character not by your grand gestures, but by your consistent patterns. They watch how you handle small commitments to predict how you'll handle big ones. They observe your behavior when nothing important is at stake to determine whether they can count on you when everything is at stake. Here's what most people don't realize. Your brain keeps an unconscious running tally of every interaction you have with another person. Every time you do exactly what you said you would do, you get a point. Every time you don't, you lose points. But here's the crucial part. Most people don't even realize they're being scored because these interactions seem too small to matter. When you tell someone you'll call them back in an hour and you call back in exactly an hour, that registers as reliability. When you say you'll send information by end of day and it arrives at 4 p.m., that registers as dependability. When you promise to look into something and you follow up with detailed research, that registers as trustworthiness. The framework works because it creates a halo effect. When people see that you're absolutely reliable in small, verifiable matters, they automatically assume you're reliable in large, unverifiable ones. Your track record with minor commitments becomes proof of your character in major situations. Here's how you implement this strategy. First, become hyper-aware of every small promise or commitment you make. Second, start treating these micro-commitments as seriously as major contracts. Third, actually over-deliver whenever possible. If you said you'd research something, provide more information than requested. If you promise to arrive at 2 p.m., show up at 1:55. The beautiful thing about this approach is that it compounds over time. Each reliable interaction builds on the previous ones, creating a reputation for dependability that becomes incredibly valuable. People start recommending you for opportunities because they know you'll follow through. They include you in important projects because they trust you to deliver. They share sensitive information because they know you'll handle it properly. What the guy I mentioned earlier understood is that in a world where most people's promises have become meaningless, being someone whose word actually means something gives you an enormous competitive advantage. Your reliability becomes a rare commodity in a market flooded with unreliable people. This isn't about perfectionism or never making mistakes. It's about creating a pattern of consistency that people can count on. When you occasionally do make an error, your track record of reliability gives you the benefit of the doubt that others don't get. Number 5. The authentic disagreement method. The smartest negotiator I ever met taught me something that completely flipped my understanding of influence. He told me that the fastest way to gain someone's trust isn't to agree with them about everything. It's actually the opposite. The fastest way to gain real influence with someone is to disagree with them about the right things at the right times in the right way. This seems backwards at first. Most people think that agreement builds rapport and disagreement destroys it. But he showed me something fascinating. When you never disagree with someone, they unconsciously start to distrust you because deep down they know you're just telling them what they want to hear. But when you disagree thoughtfully about smaller matters, it makes your agreement on bigger matters incredibly powerful. This is the fifth and final principle that will revolutionize how you build influence through strategic honesty. The authentic disagreement method is based on understanding that trust isn't built through constant agreement. Real trust is built by proving that you think independently and speak truthfully, even when it might be easier to just go along with what someone wants to hear. Here's the psychology behind why this works. When someone always agrees with us, our subconscious starts to question their sincerity. We begin to wonder if they actually believe what they're saying or if they're just trying to please us. But when someone disagrees with us respectfully and with solid reasoning, it proves they're giving us their honest thoughts rather than calculated responses. The key is choosing your disagreements strategically. You want to disagree about topics that don't really matter to you, but do matter to them, while being respectful and showing genuine reasoning for your different perspective. This demonstrates that you're not just being contrarian, but that you actually think things through independently. For example, if someone is passionate about a particular approach to solving a problem, and you genuinely see potential issues with that approach, sharing your concerns respectfully shows that you're engaged and thinking critically. Even if they don't immediately accept your perspective, they'll respect that you cared enough to offer honest feedback rather than empty agreement. The magic happens when you do find areas where you genuinely agree. Because you've established yourself as someone who doesn't just automatically agree with everything, your agreement carries exponentially more weight. When you say, "I think you're absolutely right about this," they know you mean it because you've proven you're willing to disagree when you don't mean it. Here's how to implement this method effectively. First, listen carefully to understand what really matters to the person you're talking with. Second, identify areas where you have genuine differences of opinion on topics that aren't crucial to your relationship or goals. Third, share your different perspective respectfully, explaining your reasoning rather than just stating your disagreement. The most influential people understand that their agreement becomes worthless if they agree with everything. They know that strategic disagreement actually enhances their credibility rather than damaging it. They've learned that people trust independent thinkers more than people pleasers. This isn't about being difficult or argumentative for the sake of it. It's about being genuinely honest in your interactions, which includes honest disagreement when that's what the situation calls for. When people know you'll tell them what you really think rather than what you think they want to hear, your opinions become incredibly valuable to them. The negotiator I mentioned earlier used this principle to build a client base that trusted him completely. They knew that when he recommended a deal, he genuinely believed it was good because they'd seen him advise against deals when he thought they were bad. His willingness to disagree when necessary made his agreement when appropriate incredibly powerful. These 5 principles work together to create something remarkable. When you master the credibility bank account strategy, practice selective vulnerability, leverage inconvenient truth, implement predictable honesty, and use authentic disagreement, you become someone whose word carries real weight in the world. Machiavelli understood that true power doesn't come from deception or manipulation. It comes from mastering the strategic use of truth itself. In a world where most people's promises have become meaningless and their word carries no weight, being someone whose honesty is both genuine and strategic gives you an almost unfair advantage. The beautiful thing about calibrated honesty is that it creates a positive cycle. The more trustworthy you become, the more opportunities come your way. The more reliable your word becomes, the more people want to work with you, invest in you, and follow your lead. Your reputation becomes your greatest asset because it opens doors that money can't buy and creates connections that manipulation could never achieve. Start implementing these principles today and watch how quickly people begin to see you differently, trust you more deeply, and give you opportunities that seemed impossible before. Your strategic honesty will become the foundation of influence that lasts. The next video the algorithm chose for you isn't random. It's your next tactical upgrade. Click it now and continue your silent ascent.